Welcome to episode 17 of the Magic Hour. I'm Paul Bevan, and joining me today we have co-host Professor Andrew Laslett. Welcome, Andrew.
Morning, everybody.
And also joining us as co-host today, Ella Jenkins. Ella, welcome to you.
Hello, everybody.
We've got another very special guest joining us today, serial founder and entrepreneur, Mr. Allen Zelden. Alan, welcome.
Hey, mate. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Good to see you. Love to touch on a few different areas today, particularly your journey to where you are today. Obviously, the plant-based food sector as well. I'd love to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship as well. But for our listeners, could you give us a bit of an overview of your background?
So, wow, depends how far we want to go back. Well, my background was actually in digital, in online media, by virtue of my background in working in property and working with fashion retailers there, and then applying that physical real estate in retail fashion to online real estate. Anyway, we built an online fashion marketplace, and I'd since exited and wanted to work in something that was a lot more in line with my mission and values. And plant-based was a natural fit for me, given it was a sector that was generating some energy, being vegan as well. It was a category I wanted to support. And then before you know it, I mean, the ball sort of dropped, and I just threw a couple of smoke bombs in regards to other business opportunities that have since sort of opened up and done quite well. So, but that's my background, really.
So how did you get involved in digital and fashion? Like what was the drive there?
All right. Well, that is going far back. So I was working in real estate, in commercial and retail real estate, after having worked in real estate and property in New York. And I was working with a variety of fashion retailers, predominantly on Oxford Street, which was a very popular retail strip in Sydney. And a lot of these fashion retailers are spending a lot of money on their new online presence. Now, this is pre-e-commerce. This is back in the day when we had flashy websites and a little counter with the traffic monitor at the bottom. And also Facebook pages. Everyone wanted to get Facebook fan. And so I had a friend of mine that had built a business called Home Improvement Pages, High Pages. And they had done a great job building this niche classifieds. And so we applied a very similar model in fashion online, because I knew that these fashion retailers were no longer in fashion brands were no longer interested in investing in yellow pages, but they wanted to bolster their online presence. So we built this little classifieds engine by virtue of our network, and 45 days later, it was a cash flow positive business. And back in the day, there wasn't like really turnkey a web solution. So it was quite an expensive smoke bomb or thing that I wanted to work towards. And then over time, we built a small team. There was 4 of us, me, a co-founder, and 2 salespeople. And we built a really healthy classifieds business that had about 1,400 fashion retailers at the time. And then by virtue of that, I mean, it was very much about pivoting and moving with the market. There was the emergence of e-commerce. And initially, the problem we were solving was really to help these fashion brands and retailers generate a new audience and visitors to their website. But then it all became about online sales and solving the problem for those fashion retailers that were having a hard time competing with their wholesale channel that effectively had become their retail competitors. And hence the emergence of the e-commerce. And again, this is pre-Shopify, WooCommerce, pre-point of sale systems like Vend and Xero. And I mean, and then the story goes on. We built some great channel partnerships. We built out the e-commerce side of the business. We raised capital. We went to raise capital rather. And that was a hugely eye-opening experience, of which I've generated a lot of learnings that I continue to carry through in my business and my work today. But yeah, that's really essentially how I fell into online fashion.
Excellent. Look, I'm sure just from the points you've touched on there, there's, as you said, a lot of learnings, particularly when it comes to capital raising and changing markets, that translates to today's world of alternative proteins. Have you always had that entrepreneurial flair? It sounds like you've always been, looking at opportunities that you can you know, get into and, collaborate with others, and set up businesses in? Has that always been like your bent?
It's an interesting question. I never really thought about it. You know, I think a large part of it came from the fact that I was born into a family that was, that had done property. Like I was living and breathing property all my life. And my dad had built a real estate agency, one of the most prominent in Bondi at the time when Bondi was really considered to be a not very exciting suburb. It was quite cheap. They had a sewage pipe
Mm.
that spat out on the beach, and then a lot of these immigrants from Russia and Hungary, et cetera, are looking to buy property. My dad was this launching pad for people to come into the market and buy accessible, competitive properties. And then things had really changed, and people had made a lot of money. And I grew up around that, and one of the things when I was in property, I was always under my dad's shadow. I'd be looking at, like, when I was a buyer for a family pension fund, they would ask all the time, "What does your dad think?" Or when I was working in property management and sales, they would say, "Oh, what does your dad say about that? Would he buy it?" And I was always in his shadow, and so I wanted to do something different. Something I wanted to have an edge, so I became a property valuer. And it was funny, even being a property valuer, you would do everything by the book and look at comparable sales. But my dad, he would look at a property and say, "Oh, it will sell for this." And he was always right. And I just felt like it was so hard to make my own mark and stand on my own 2 feet. So I always had this, it wasn't so much being an entrepreneur, but I wanted to make my own mark and be my own person. But going back even before then, the days of property, I mean, I was at school. I went to a very affluent school as well, but I didn't really have access to the kind of money that a lot of my peers had at school. I was given a $2 coin. That was my lunch money. So I had to do things on the side to be able to do that. I was given, my parents bought me a car so I could work in property from a very young age. But the rule was that they would only give me $200 a week, which had to then pay the petrol, pay the registration, insurance, etc., but only if I'd worked 1 day a week. And so that really allowed me. I remember having to budget and think, okay, I can afford one latte a day. When I was 18, I was like, I could afford 2 drinks a week. So if I went out, I wanted to, I fancied a girl and I wanted to buy her a drink, that was one drink, that was it. That was my budget. So I had to, like, create little things, to be able to constantly thinking, how can I make money? So I had this rule back in the day when I'd drive my friends around. It was the gold coin rule. If you jumped in my car, you had to give me a gold coin. Which would then pay for my petrol.
Smart.
I suppose it wasn't so much. I mean, I don't know if that's what effectively seeded that entrepreneurial energy, but yeah, that I'm sure all of that played a big part in regards to who I am today.
Sounds like it. Absolutely. So tell us about you know being plant based and sustainability. When did that come into your life?
Well, after working in online digital for about 10 years, the category was experiencing a bit of a hiccup. Um, and there was quite a few roll-up opportunities, and we acquired a couple of other digital media assets. And I just had my second child, and I was working crazy hours, and I was really struggling with the juggle. And it was a bit of a dark time for me personally. Working till midnight, up at 5 a.m. with my 1-year-old, my eldest, take him to a playground, and which that was just a rule every morning. I would take my eldest to a playground so we could spend some quality time, because that was the only time I had with him. And I remember being so busy, I'd just be on my phone the whole time. And he'd want my attention, and I just had this moment where I felt really just poor of myself. And I remember thinking I'm a bad person, bad husband, bad business owner, bad father. And I just realized that something had to change. And I did a Google search about ways to increase my energy, because I couldn't change my circumstance. It was just a really busy time, and there was a lot being demanded of me. And there was a bunch of different things like increase your vitamin C and iron, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I read said, sometimes if you give up meat, you can have this great spurt of energy. So I decided to go meat free for 30 days. And in that 30 days, my whole life had changed. I mean, I had no inhibition to be vegan. It was never an agenda to completely transform my lifestyle and diet. But in that 30 days, when my youngest would wake up, I remember like jumping out of bed and throwing him over to my wife so she could breastfeed. And then when my son was up at 5 a.m., I was already up before that. Like I was ready, and my concentration levels were amazing. My sleep was so much deeper. And I'm not to say that it's for everyone, but it certainly was the case for me. And at the end of 30 days, all I could think about throughout that 30-day period was spag bowl, spaghetti bolognese. And so I went to the local butcher, the Churchill's in Mallara, and I bought the finest cut of meat, and I spent all day making this mince. And at the end of this full day of making this absolute gourmet spaghetti bolognese, I sat down to eat it, and my mind was just hankering for this dish. But as I was eating it, my body was rejecting it. I had this really strange like paradigm where like I just couldn't ingest it. And I remember thinking, okay, well, maybe I can just keep eating meat free for a while. My body doesn't want it, which is really bizarre. And then I actually learned about the dairy industry, and that just made me fume. And I got so angry that I decided to give up dairy. I thought as a parent, I could never support that industry. And then I quickly just gave up eggs, and I loved my poached eggs every morning. And lo and behold, I was a vegan, but I refused to say the word at the time. This is close to a decade ago. There was some stigma. It wasn't often used. And I remember like I used to go around, and I didn't really have many resources to learn more, because I had some health issues. I had osteopenia. My family has osteoporosis. My mom, my grandmother, they all had it. So I felt like I was heading towards that same direction. And I remember just looking and Googling, and I didn't really have a lot of resources, but I had the Rich Roll podcast. That was all I had. And so I remember just tuning into some of his earliest episodes. And one of his first episode guests was a gentleman named James Wilkes, who'd later made the Game Changers film. So I reached out to him. This is way before the film had been created. And I said, look, the information that you have is incredible. I'd love some mentoring or just have a quick phone call. So he jumped on a call, and he was really invaluable. And I told him about some of the diet that I've been eating, dark leafy greens to get my calcium, and putting in my FitnessPal app to make sure I was hitting enough. And one of the things he said, just calm down on the dark leafy greens. The absorption of those from a calcium standpoint is far greater than dairy, milk, etc. And so he said, just get your bones checked. And interestingly, I had for over 10 years, I walked with an orthotic in my foot. I had a fragmented sesamoid bone at the bottom of my toe. So every step would cause me pain. And that pain started to disappear. And I went to my GP and I said, let's get some blood work. And he was already preparing me for all these drugs and how we're going to reintroduce certain foods in my diet, because he was worried about me. And I did not only were my bloods perfect, we did a bone density scan, and my osteopenia had disappeared. It actually had reversed. So I believe that I must have a genetic disposition to dairy personally, and my body was thriving by taking it out. But generally, I felt amazing. And the more that I learned, and the more people I spoke with, the more I felt I'd be on the phone to the US in the morning, driving to my office, and I'd sit in my office and go, what am I doing? Like, what kind of legacy am I leaving my kids? So I'm working towards building these multimedia businesses to drive just more consumption of fashion purchasing and dresses. And I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And every day I just started to lose more and more interest in what I was doing. And I realized I felt like I was wasting my time. I was wasting my life away. Hence, I looked to exit. And that was a huge journey in of itself. But we eventually did. We went in the form of an asset sale, which was like nothing compared to what we'd actually built. But I wanted freedom. I didn't want the earnouts, the milestones. I wanted a clean cut. And I jumped headfirst into space, not knowing where I would go, what I would do. But I had some contacts, went to the US a few times, had a lot of meetings, trying to figure out what I would do. And look, I'd like to make it sound like it was amazing and like everything was great. No, it wasn't. COVID came at the same time, and I hit absolute rock bottom. So I went from feeling like an absolute multi-million-dollar hero to not be able to pay my bills. But yeah, I mean, there was a moment where I refinanced my mortgage, invested in myself, and opened myself up to the universe, and started to write down all these things I was good at, bad at, what I wanted to do, what made me happy, sad, etc. But interestingly, in that moment of introspection, everything I do today came out in that one moment. So that's how I led into this space.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
It correlates to virtually everyone that we speak to, where there's an identifiable moment. It's upon an incident in their life, and it's upon some self reflection, and it just changes the course of their life, and including you, including me as well. And there's some amazing lessons in there as well around redirecting your energy and your attention into what's important to you, and self-educating and looking further into things. That's a fascinating story.
Thanks, Paul.
No, absolutely. There's a really interesting point in there, Alan. And it comes up again and again in people we talk to who are involved in startups, and it's about the risk taking. You said you refinanced your mortgage to get things going. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the appetite for risk that's required to go from something that might be working and is stable, but is it a addiction to risk, or is it that you need a risk? I mean, what do you think?
I It's funny because you couldn't have asked for a time in my life where I would be running in the other direction, having 2 children
Mm,
and having to support my family. But I just felt like I could maintain the same trajectory. I could have actually stayed working in property and created a lot of financial freedom and success for myself, but it just didn't put the spark in my day. It didn't excite me. At the time, I wanted to do something independent, and I felt I had more to give, and I wanted to take risks. At that time, I didn't have children and a family that were relying on me to support. But one thing I think I took in way of the risk, I built a business in online fashion, not knowing anything about online and fashion.
hmm,
And I'd learned via osmosis. And so I had a little bit of confidence in my ability to do that then, a lot of learnings. And you learn the hard way. I hate saying you learn from your failures because you often do, but it was more so the successes that I learned from, and I realized what I should be doing more of. And then moving into a category again I knew nothing about, it was quite risky. There were a lot of times, but I think, I came from property, and in refinancing my mortgage, I made an investment in myself. That was the first time I ever took really capital
mm.
all my time because I backed myself. I knew that if I was like had asked enough questions, met the right people, and I could understand what problems needed to be solved and what people were prepared to pay to solve, that I would find the right direction. And I knew enough people, but it was scary.
Yeah.
But I think rather than sit and twiddle my thumbs and then refinance the mortgage, I don't have the book on me here, but there is a book where every day I wrote, as I mentioned, what am I good at and what am I bad at?
Mm.
Hmm.
What am
So
I?
powerful, yeah.
What makes me sad? And there was a lot of that. And you'd start writing and it feels really silly, but within about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you start to really unlock a lot. And then like, what do I want to do? And what am I like, don't want to do? Like, what am I good at? When you know these things and you start to, and I came to a place where I realized anything I was prepared to do, it needed to tick 3 boxes. And to this day, I still stand by these 3 boxes. These need to be ticked in any venture and anything I work towards. And the 3 are access to deal flow. So one of the things in moving into this space was I found that a lot of those same investors that had invested in e-commerce and digital were now looking at the alternative protein category. Not because they're passionate about the space, but this was the new vertical. This was the new space they wanted to enter. And they didn't know anyone, but they knew me.
Yep.
They would knock on my door, and I started to bridge opportunities. Now, to be careful how to do it, I don't have an AFSL. But I could see that I was acting as a bit of a conduit, but also it didn't make me happy because I realized that so many of these businesses, once they access external capital, they really have no view about what that journey actually looks like. They think there's a lot of money in the space, let's grab it. What comes along with that? And so I wouldn't say what they could do, but sometimes I would send them the odd little article, odd little message, or something they should just listen to and connect the dots. And so it wasn't something I wanted to do. But the access to deal flow and knowing who's doing what in what spaces was very valuable. And you find a lot of business people today that are super successful is because they have access to deal flow. A lot of businesses, some of the early investors in the space had access to deal flow, jumped in, and it's since been able to ride the wave. The second one was, and this is one that I come back to from my digital space, is control your own success. Now, it might sound really egotistical, but it's more so like I launched Futurewell. It's an online media platform that's sort of like acts as a guiding light, a space of illumination for those creating environmental and earth-friendly ideas and projects in fashion, footwear, and design. Started out as a hobby, and I didn't put a lot of money to it. Now, thankfully, it's doing really well, and I'm very proud of it. And now it's become some sort of a quasi agency, and we've done some great work with Nike and Google, etc. But when I started it, I thought I'm prepared to invest X to it, and then if let's say, and then we'll see what happens. But let's just say it doesn't really work out. I knew that I could easily throw it an ad engine, and work with one or two people I know from my days in fashion, and we could just be monetizing it through ads and traffic, and I'll get my investment back. It's not what I want to do, but I'm able to control the success for it, right, in that direction. And it's similar to like other opportunities in regards to what I want to work towards. Like I keep thinking, okay, well, if I lean into here, I want to be able to control its success. And the third one is impact, which is the most important one. And those are my three drivers. I only learned that after investing a lot in myself in regards to finding out what are the things I'm good at, and etc. So that came out of that experience. And I think that is sort of, there's a huge amount of risk, but it's not so like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to throw it in the wind. Like I am doing the work. I'm doing the foundational work that I can then leverage to when I go to the market to have better conversations. And of course, in the risk piece, there's only so far. You don't do it for years. I mean, I was prepared to do it for a couple of months. I had access to money doing things I didn't want to do, but I ended up but everything I do today, I said no to each of those things first before we got to a place. I never wanted to work in online fashion again. I swore I would never. I said to myself, I would never sell a product online ever again, never sell ads, etc. And I have this content media platform. Today, we still don't sell anything online. We don't sell ads. And I stand by it. And it's interesting that it's probably done a lot better than some of my other digital businesses in the past. And it's the reverse. So, it's just an interesting piece. I mean, had that not really worked out for me, I mean, I probably would have gone back into the workforce or done something I didn't want to do and just continued to bide my time until I found the right thing to sort of drive.
It's just interesting. That's a common thread with a lot of the people that we've talked to as well. We've talked to people working in lots of different spaces that all feel this need to make an impact and have purpose in their everyday life. We spend a lot of our lives working, and it's about looking at your skill set and seeing how you can apply that to contribute to that greater purpose. It's really interesting. I was wondering, could you explain to the listeners a little bit about your business's Plantform and the upcoming I think it was a plant-based seafood business.
Yeah, boldly, thanks.
Yeah.
So I mean, beyond Futurewell, Plantform. So Plantform is the private label arm of a plant-based manufacturing operation with global distribution, over 1,000 private label products in market globally. I had no inhibition to work in plant-based food whatsoever. You not have, like, it was the last thing on my mind. But in the work that I do on the investment advisory front for Future Food, I realized that the greatest use of funds was in manufacturing. And so there are three value drivers when it comes to food, not in your sector, not in cell-based, but let's just say traditionally food, is manufacturing, distribution, and awareness. And so what I found was that if you look at, like, even in Australia, here's the plant-based food category is projected to be valued at $3 to $9 billion by 2030. And today it's at 140 million, and it's been 140 million for a while. And so a lot of the money that's gone into the space has been to help fund the scale required to meet that demand. However, and then from there, and then you invest in distribution, etc. But no one's really invested in the awareness side. And I'm very passionate about growing this sector. I want us to win. I know we will win. But I keep thinking, imagine if we'd use a fraction of those funds in awareness and really thinking through how we're getting these foods in the mouths of people that would not normally throw it in their shopping cart or trolley. Or menu rather. And And I kept thinking about the manufacturing piece, and I happen to know the greatest manufacturers in Southeast Asia. And they approached me about working with them. And there was initial resistance, and I thought there was something maybe in the vegan seafood, which is the Boldly Foods piece. But in working, I said, look, what I really want is I want to collaborate and tie into the manufacturing piece, because I knew that if I had access to that, I could help the foundational element of this category to grow. So for instance, it might be some of this. Initially, it was a lot of thinking through about more like initially it was thinking through more things around like co-packing piece, like how can we support that foundational piece of the business, perhaps coming in via like different payment terms or equity deals or etc. So that when they raise money, they can actually raise that money and focus more on the awareness, and we would just take care of the foundational piece, because manufacturing is rarely agile. It's very complex. It's very expensive. And very few businesses in Australia actually have, even the plant-based food businesses actually have their own manufacturing. They still use co-packers. So there was that. But then I think over time as well, there was the evolution of Planform to be able to support other businesses when having to raise capital, having challenges raising capital. They need to keep the lights on. They need to maintain their distribution. So we can really help them land and expand inside existing distribution where we have over 1,000 SKUs. When it's range review time, what do they want to put? Rather than raising $2-3 million and working towards new product, why don't we take some of our product? We can custom innovate as well, but put it in front of the retailer or in food service businesses. And if they want it and they demand or they want to purchase, well, then we can work with them on that. And they've got existing customer at the front where we can supply the food, and they can feel very confident in their ability to bolster their revenue. So there was that. And then I think over time as well, a lot of the efforts we've been working towards is also private label with global store brands. What you're finding is a greater emphasis right now on the fact that an inhibitor to growth for the category is price. And so if we can go direct to the retail from a private label standpoint, then the consumer wins. They end up paying a fraction of the price for the same and or similar product. So there's been a bit of that as well with Planform. Now, by virtue of that, we launched Boldly, which is the widest range of vegan seafood products in market: calamari, sashimi, tuna, salmon, prawns, whitefish, etc. That's going to be launching in the US and exclusively to food service. Again, from an impact standpoint, we wanted to launch it purely for food service, because I'm finding that food service is where people typically have their first experience of these foods. And no one really celebrates and or supports that sector. These independent food service operators. These are the same people I work with, similarly in the fashion sector, the independent fashion retailers. And so I wanted to support those businesses, those that are dealing with a fragmented distribution ecosystem, slaving away in the kitchen, working towards like dealing with cost of living crisis, staffing, etc. I mean, the challenges they experience daily are numerous. And so in working directly with them, we wanted to launch this market of vegan seafood products, because it sort of emulates similar to what happens in plant-based meat. There's this curiosity, experiential factor, but we will very easily evolve and look beyond seafood. Once we get a view in regards to what are they after? What products are they looking for? What are the prices we need to hit? Make it competitive. And using that information and be able to solve their problems, we can then come in and launch more. It's a long play. It's going to be a long, slow play. And this is all privately funded. None of this has got external capital whatsoever. This is by virtue of the work we do with Planform. But it's very much at the end of the day focusing on solving those problems and impact.
Yeah. And that's super interesting with seafood in particular. Was the impact reasoning a part of why you chose to focus on seafood, or was it demand? What was the...
No, certainly not demand, because I mean, there's a white space piece. I mean, vegan plant-based seafood represents such a small part of the sector.
Yeah.
Meat sales haven't really grown. They've actually retracted in sales in the last 3 years after billions of dollars of investment, which proves that no investment or not enough investment has been actually gone into awareness. But to me, there is a personal piece to it. For instance, knowing what I've now learned and know, if someone had forced me under duress to eat an animal product again, seafood would be the last.
Mm.
Be the last food I would ever consume. Um, and for a variety of reasons, which I don't want to like get into now because I feel like a lot of that messaging, I'm not really for a lot of that combative messaging. I think a lot of people do that. And I'm all for just driving more accessible, positive, aspirational
Yeah.
messaging. But I just feel like similar to me when I started to ask more questions of my consumption choices, I think that if people start to lift the lid on that and start to
Mm.
realize a lot more. And then you got documentaries like Seaspiracy as well that share a lot of
Yeah.
that. I think that was a big part for me. And seafood, another interesting thing about seafood, going back to what I previously said, is most seafood today is actually consumed out of home.
Mm.
When you think about calamari, prawns, etc., sashimi, they're things that are consumed in a food service setting. And because I'm passionate about supporting the food service category, it just seemed like such a perfect fit. And the fact that it's white space, no one's really added a nice, exciting brand language to vegan seafood, of which we've applied to Boldly. So there's a variety of reasons in regards to why we're using seafood as the launching pad and catalyst. But we'll very quickly move out of seafood by virtue. But again, it'll be based on. It's interesting. One last thing I'll add is that when I was recently in the US and I went to a trade show, and I made a lot of had a lot of great conversations with the distributors, and the general consensus is, look, there's no real demand for vegan seafood. It's still too early. I love what you're doing. Maybe a handful of people might try. There's a curiosity factor, agree. So it's very targeted. There are people that are doing some great things there, but you really need to connect those dots yourself. And then I say to them, well, look, this is an organic extension of Plantform. We have over 1,000 products. Well, what products are currently selling for you very well? Where are you finding outages, pain points? What products will be really exciting for you? We've got varieties of chicken, and we've got, your beef, made a variety of soys and mushrooms, like any number of products, anything from like jerky to cold cuts, you name it. And they'll go, oh, well, why didn't you just say that? And I always say, well, because we wouldn't have this meeting right now if I'd come to you if I said we're launching a plant-based chicken brand or a plant-based beef brand. It just wouldn't have, because it's something new and has a bit of brand language. And so it's been a really interesting learning across, and it's an interesting time in the space too. But yeah, that's a big reason why seafood's been such a great catalyst and launching pad for us.
Another part of that that's so important is it is like the wide variety of options open to people to try new products that are alternatives to products that have included cruelty and bad environmental impact in the past is going to be the solution to creating a better future. It's got to be that wide variety where people have the opportunity for choice. And I think the other interesting thing there is the more choice that people have, the more awareness there is. And discovering things in the food service industry, trying things for the first time. What we talk about a lot is the lack of awareness surrounding the entire alternative protein industry, and especially cultivated meat. How are you? How do you approach that with Boldly? How are you planning to approach brand awareness and awareness of the protein industry in general?
Good question. So there's two parts. So there's Plantform and Boldly. There's my dream, and then there's what I'm doing now. And I'll start with like my dreams. We have, because I like to think of where do I want to be, and then I sort of work my way back. Like what is my dream? What does my 3-5 years actually look like? What am I doing? What's actually happening? And I look at Plantform, and by virtue of the fact that we have this great range, my dream would be to be this turnkey solution for those institutions, educational entities, businesses, corporates, etc., where those that have these ESG environmental goals, that we can come in and completely and totally plantify their menu, be it one day a month, end to end, where you can actually come in and say, what do you guys currently serve on your menus? Let's take everything you have here, and I will plantify everything. If there are holes, of course I'd add, like for instance, if there are certain products that I don't feel are hitting the mark, like there's no way we're going to launch a burger, for instance. There's been so much money in burgers. It's not a space I'm even interested in tapping into, but I can make the right calls and make the right contacts. We can come in and plantify those menus and get people to consume these foods for the first time. And they can go and they can sit there and they can begrudge it. They can start doing their Google searches. But as long as they're talking about it, I just on the Boldly piece. Now moving it towards Boldly, we were at a trade show and we were right next to this seafood business, Trident. And this person rocks up and goes, all right, my name is blah, blah, blah from Trident. I take care of their salmon division. I want to know why you think your salmon is superior nutritionally, texturally, environmentally. Hit me right now. And so my team were like, oh no, Allen. So they pull me over. And instantly the guy hits me with the same slander. And I sit there and my instant response is actually going back to all my LinkedIn posts. I'm like going through like an encyclopedia in my brain, trying to think of anything I previously said about salmon. And then I thought, what's that going to achieve? It's not going to do anything. Why would I want to become like this guy's armed and ready? He wants an argument. So like, there's just no point. It's not going to move the needle. So I said, you know what? Appreciate you coming around. What would be more important and valued to me is just try the salmon. Try it. Let me know what you think. You can smash me on it. I really like that as a conversation I want to have. So we give him a piece of the salmon nigiri and he goes, no, take it off the rice. So we take the rice off. He goes, no, take off the sauce and the sesame seeds and whatever else. I want it plain. So, okay. So he puts it in his mouth, chews it, spits half of it out, of course, and looks at me and goes, I know this is garbage. I know this is not food. This is absolutely like, it's just not food. Well, he said much more worse things. I'm not going to repeat. But if that wasn't a sushi roll, you would have had me. And I thought that I got goosebumps thinking about it. I was like, that's enough.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because to me, when he goes home that night to dinner with his friends or his family, and he goes, stuff this plant-based food category, it's such a joke, but I did try the salmon. It's still absolutely, I'm sure the ingredients are frankenfood and all this stuff, but you know what? Like it probably got me. That's enough because that one person in the room, it may plant a seed. I used to have people that work for me in my former business, they're a vegan. So I'd be having my chicken burger and they'd be smashing me with like footage and insights in regards to the chicken kill floor, etc. None of it worked. Went through one ear out the other. They were just annoying me. And now I know better and I realize I will never be that person. What we need to do is we need to create greater dialogue. From a cultivated meat standpoint, one needs to look at an example that might be what Super Meat did in Israel when they launched the chicken, the restaurant. So they served their cultivated chicken and they couldn't sell it. So it was given away. And I think people just pay what they wanted at the end. But everyone was talking about a cultivated chicken in that company at that time when I would speak to people in Israel. It was incredible. It did a great thing for the category. And these are the experiences I feel that I want to create with Boldly in so much that I want to, if I can come in and support the food service sector with competitive and a wide and seamless distribution for these products and then arm them with creative assets and also just see how we can solve their problems. This is a great way for me to be able to get people to have an experience. Look, people have a plant-based burger today, right? The category came out blazing. Everyone wanted to try a Beyond Burger. They tried it once. I don't eat it every day. It's a burger's a burger. They're both crap. But if you eat it, you eat a burger once a month. That's how it has to be, right? But for those that typically eat a dirty hamburger, once a year they may have tried the Beyond Burger. There was a curiosity, experiential factor. They may have told some other people, but at least they got the foods in their mouths. And this is what I keep thinking about. That's what I'm working towards with Boldly, and that's my dream with Plantform.
Yeah, 100%. Reminds me of I made I can't remember the brand, but plant-based burgers for a couple of my friends who'd never tried anything plant-based, and they were eating these burgers, and they're like, "This isn't terrible."
Yeah.
And I found that reaction hilarious because they were very happy about the fact that, they were like, this isn't like the strangest alternative. Like it's pretty similar to a regular burger.
Ella, let me tell you, it is so hard in Australia. I love the sector here. I want us to smash it. I want us to win. But some of the food, like when you go to the US and you're trying the plant-based varieties of their cheeses and their meats, etc., and you come to Australia, it's so hard. It's so upsetting. When the Game Changers came out, everyone was like, "Oh, I'm going to try this. I'm curious." They went to their local, they tried some of these foods that the major retailers were pushing and peddling, and they don't, like there's obviously, I mean, our major retailers, there is a retail duopoly, and they have they don't really. It's not the greatest place and launching pad for like independent food businesses to scale. Who really has? And you think about independent food businesses that have scaled successfully in Australia, there are very few. And the ones that have, they've really invested in awareness, market share, mind share to unlock market share. And it's a shame because a lot of these people, we had a moment, a lot of these people tried these foods and didn't come back. They were like, I can't eat this, and it's a shame because like when when Impossible launched in Australia, I was like, thank heavens, finally, they can actually see where it can be like, what it can be like. And I'm not like I'm talking only taste and texture. We're not talking about like looking at the back of the label here for a second, right? There's definitely a conversation to be had there. But the thing is, beyond all that, we're only at the beginning. That's the other part I wanted to just stress is that a lot of these people, when they try these foods and they go out there and they want to start finding an argument that just sort of suits their narrative around why they don't want to eat these foods again. It's important to remember that like we really like at the beginning when in 99 2000 there was an e-commerce, there was an internet bubble, a digital bubble, and the bubble burst. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars was wiped overnight. But digital didn't disappear. The internet didn't disappear. And then close to 10 years later, plus, etc., we had the same when it came to e-commerce and the bubble. You had these outstanding valuations. The category went up and then burst. Look at it; it's still being used. We're still out there. The categories are still growing, and that's how I feel about this space. And so, like what you're mentioning about with your friends, I love hearing that. It excites me, and that's
I
part
think
of
it's good. Yeah.
when I launched the sashimi, I remember I had friends come over and I was thinking about it, and I created a sushi plate. I didn't tell them. I said, "Guys, this is your dinner. This is mine," and they'll be eating it. No one was the wiser. So I knew there was an opportunity here still, with that. And it's so exciting because we really are at the beginning.
Absolutely. Alan, I love your journey and I can relate to so much of it. Even for myself, I've got clearly identifiable turning points in my life where I became vegetarian and then when I became vegan. I also had many previous businesses, before Magic Valley. One of them was a mortgage broking business where I was, seeing clients face to face and realized, it wasn't a good use of my time, and it wasn't what I was best at doing. And then I took that business online, which then became a finance brokerage for small business owners. And I taught myself digital marketing, and I would drive traffic to the website. And so, I got that understanding of, supply and demand and markets and social media marketing. And then I was really self-taught. And so, I was looking for mentors. I didn't have anyone in my life in that space. And so, I was listening to people like Gary Vaynerchuk, who, social media marketing expert, but also preaches to double down on your strengths, identify what your strengths are and double down on those. And then I read a book, the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch. Now, the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto principle, is well known and it's been around for a long time, but it's basically, 80% of your results will come from 20% of the inputs. That's not just in a business context, but that's in life, in happiness, in enjoyment, in all aspects of your life that you can apply it to. And again, it's basically working out what you're good at, doubling down on that, working out what makes you happy, do more of that. And so I applied that to my life as well. And then impact became really important in my life in terms of, my veganism and what I was working towards, and, what was really important to me with my life mission. So I'm just wondering, did you have any mentors, particularly for our listeners, is there anyone that you listened to? Were there any books that you read? Like how did that evolve in your life?
All my life, there's this thought that in life, you build a business, you hit market fit, you have to raise capital. Now, in your business, you absolutely have to. There's no question. I would never disparage that. And like you have to grow, constant growth, build. People ask you, what's the size of your business? And you're like, oh, 5 people. People go, oh, you ask, what's the size of your business? 100, 200 people. Wow, that's great. All of a sudden that's a barometer for success. I think I'm just not of that ilk. I just don't agree. And what does success actually define? Like, how does people define success? And these are things I've learned over time. And one of the similar to the capital raising piece, it's sort of the same thing with a mentor. I was always told, find a mentor, speak to someone. And it's funny that I love connecting. I didn't have a direct mentor. And I continue to speak to a lot of people and I ask a lot of questions. But I wouldn't ever say that someone was a direct mentor. I look at and then in regards to books as well, I wouldn't say there was one particular book that I ever looked to, and all those books I'm familiar with. And obviously I know Gary Vee quite well. But I try, and obviously podcasts too, and there's so much noise out there. And I just find lately, every morning I wake up, I work, deal with the US, and I'm usually on the phone. I'm trying to quieten that down. And sometimes I think, let's listen to another podcast, and I try not to. I don't really have a book and thinking through about something that was really life-changing for me. It was very much the experience. Like my business partner in my former business, he did an MBA. And he was doing the MBA while we were at doing the business. And he would tell me all the time, he would say, Alan, and I would think, maybe I should do an MBA, because MBA is obviously, it looks good. People are excited by it. And he would always tell me, say, Alan, what we're doing is so much more relevant than an MBA. You have no reason to do an MBA. You're doing it right now. And through that roller coaster of building businesses. So there was not like that thing. I think at the end of the day, I just come back to and I go, every night before I go to bed, like, what did I do? How did I move the needle? Like, what's the impact I'm creating? How am I making a better world for my kids? My mentor, my children, they inspire. They're so present in regards to what they do. When they're involved and they're playing with their toys or at a task, there's no outside disturbances. They're in the moment. It's so hard for us today to be in the moment for anything, with all these emails and messages popping up. Like, that inspires me. I think back about some of the most inspiring people in my life, that inspire me, that give me energy. It's not like people like we see business leaders today, but there are certain people, like there's a guy named Janusz Korczak who ran an orphanage during the World War II in Warsaw Ghetto. And he was a famous author, and he took care of all the children when he was told many times he could save himself. And when all the parents got shipped off on the trains to these concentration camps, he stuck with the kids to the very last minute when the Germans roped him up and said, look, they're all going, this is your last chance. He said no. And he did something of purpose and meaning. That excites me. That gives me energy. And it reminds me to be like, every day is such a gift, and to be so present and to be so purposeful in what we do. Those are the things that give me energy. And the stories that people have, like in the books that and I read a lot of books too, they obviously aid a lot of my thinking, but I try not to. I try to tell myself, write your own book, build your own narrative. What's meaningful to you? At the end of the day, I want to do something. I want to leave an impact on this world, and I want to, from a human health, environment, animal welfare standpoint, but it all boils down to just more kindness, and those are the things that inspire me. So I don't have a book or a particular, a mentor that I've had in my life. I sometimes I do wish that I had someone, James Wilkes, who the conversations I had with him and getting into the space were very helpful. But I want to be the best version of myself. And I wish that there was someone out there that was someone had a lot of experiences as well, that I could lean on, have the old little conversation with, being the best version of themselves still to that time at 80, at 90. My grandfather, he lived to 101. He was like that. So he inspires me. But no, I've yet to meet anyone that really or a book that I've read that was just this one guiding light in regards to my experiences. But I'm open to hearing about others as well. I'm not, again, it's not coming from a place of ego. I'm so hungry to learn of other people's experiences, and what you've just shared, for instance, that gives me energy, that fuels me too.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think, for everyone, if you can find your purpose and mission, it really does become, your North Star in everything that you do. Obviously, with the businesses you're building, I'm assuming that, networking and partnerships and collaborations and being proactive and reaching out to people is really important. Do you have any tips for, people that are, looking to get started or, struggling with their business, for example, in terms of meeting like-minded people or meeting people that can, help you along the journey?
Or just before you start, Alan, or you said before when you were setting up the plant-based business, you just happen to know the
Yeah.
best manufacturing people in Asia. I
Yeah.
mean, that doesn't just happen.
So yeah, I mean, with that, I was working. Bear in mind that happened because I was working in the investment space, not a space that I really had no energy in wanting to do. But there was a particular opportunity, and we needed to optimize their manufacturing capabilities. And I'd heard of this business, and yes, it doesn't just happen. Like everything that happened, the best advice is something that I experienced. I would probably just share in that regard, because all those things, Paul, you mentioned are critical. When I had my digital business, I was very hidden. I just refused to do any media, podcasts. I didn't want to go to any events. I was in the office and I managed my team. And I was very passionate about supporting my team. And I wasn't very good at it. And that's definitely one of the things I'm not really good at. When you scale businesses and people, it's easy when you have 5 to 10 people. Anything above 10 you start to focus more on really driving, like building the business from a people side. And it's important. It's just not like it's something that needs to happen. And it's a constant learning. It's really hard. And I remember, this is going to sound quite silly. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly, but I went for when I moved into this new career phase, I wanted to do everything opposite to everything I'd ever done. I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. And I remember this experience I had with my father, who is a very successful property person in my local area. And I remember I did really well in my former business. I bought myself, when I was 19, 20, I bought myself a nice BMW and I felt like a real hero. And I loved my car. And, I was driving my dad home and I was driving through these back streets. And my dad said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm driving you home. I just don't want to deal with that traffic. So I'm driving through the back streets. I like to put my foot down on the pedal. I love driving my car, but this car wasn't meant to be sitting in traffic. And he said, like, "You're an idiot. Like, you need to be driving on the main road so everyone can see you. You need to go." And like, I went to a gym that no one went to. And he was like, "You need to go to the gym that everyone's at so everyone can see you. You need to go." When I go and I do my business, I'm an immigrant. No one knows me, but I always dress incredible. He was the most fashionable person. We had 5 rooms in my family home growing up, and each had his clothes and the corridor and the study. Like I'd go out there and buy a CD for $30. He thought I was an idiot. But if I brought home like a wallet from like Rip Curl, he'd be like, "What's that? Here's $200. Go buy yourself a Gucci wallet or something." So he was very much about like prestige and fashion and luxury. And he said, like, "How do you think I got to where I am today?" He goes, "When I go to the coffee shop, I go to the best coffee shop and I sit in the corner, in an outside corner, so everyone can see me and I can meet everyone. Because when you're out, you create opportunities. And when you're seen, you create relevance." And he built that. And, and so when I started Future World and did the investment advisory, there was a person who worked with the creative agency that helped build Future World. And she was talking about going out and being seen. And she goes, "Alan, you have imposter syndrome," because I didn't want to be seen, do stuff. And I was like, I'd never heard of it before. I was like, because even one of the things that I was doing, I was like, these people need to be showcased. These people need to be celebrated. It's not about me. Future World's not about me. It's about showcasing and celebrating those that are doing great environmental strides in fashion footwear. Nothing about me. I don't want to be on that podcast. Platforms about manufacturing, supporting others. And it wasn't comfortable for me. And it's slowly something I'm chipping away at. But that was one of the big things, is just getting out there. And I think one of the biggest things for me was LinkedIn. So I never used LinkedIn before, ever. And then I got in the habit of starting to post. And I would post, here's an article, here's something I like. And then I was like, maybe I should inject a little bit of things that excite me there, like things that, like, why I like that. And I said to myself, I'm going to start posting every day. I don't know what I'm going to post. I'm going to post. And I did it for a little while every day. And it was really uncomfortable and it was really hard. And 9 times out of 10, none of those posts landed. Like no one cared. They're just crickets. And I tried not to even look at that. I just post and get it out. I don't want to go back. I don't want to get stuck in that little trap. Same with like other social. I want to get in and get out. And I started doing more and more of it. And now I've realized that by being out and being seen, and making a little bit of noise, all these opportunities had presented themselves. So that is what one thing I would say is like getting out of your comfort zone and being seen. It is uncomfortable, when you do those things. And it's something that I still struggle with today, like to be out there. And it's something I have to work at, but I think it's important because you never know who you'll meet or what opportunity will be created, but you just got to be out there. Because if you're not out there, you get nothing. But you don't have to go out there with the view. It's sort of like dating, I suppose. If you go out there with an objective, like I want to go meet someone, and then you come home, you're going to come home disappointed. You ever go out with friends, like you don't really meet anyone. But if you just out regularly, you just want to go out and you just want to have a good time. That's your mandate. I want to go out and I want to have a good time, meet new people. You may just meet, you're going to come home, have a great time, but you may just meet that person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. So that's probably my piece of advice on that and the collaboration and creating opportunities.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Fantastic messages in there. And if my wife's listening, not for the dating side.
All right. Totally.
Ella, did you have any final questions? I'm conscious of the time. Did you have any final questions you wanted to put to Alan?
No final questions from me. Just completely agree with that last bit of advice. That was kind of the mindset I went into with coming to work at Magic Valley, 100%. What do you have to lose? It might be uncomfortable and embarrassing at first to kind of put yourself out there and back yourself and say, I can do this and put yourself out there, but it's so worthwhile.
Totally. And that's great, Ella. It's exciting to hear too. I totally agree, obviously. It's a very exciting journey. You guys are doing such a great job. You know that I think Magic Valley is, playing a very necessary role in this space. And I love everything you guys are working towards as well. So even though it's a bit of a different sector, I can see it definitely solves a problem. And one of the things I love most about, Paul, you and what you're driving towards in Magic Valley with your amazing team is the fact that like in this space, it's funny that when things are going great, everyone's sort of like we're in this echo chamber. We all feel great. When there's a couple of speed bumps and there's setbacks, it's interesting that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. And in a way, it's great to sort of trim some of that opportunistic energy. And those that are really passionate about solving the right problems and working towards, true impact, they'll succeed. And that's how I feel about you guys in regards to what you're working towards. So cheering for you.
No, thanks, Alan. Appreciate that. I've got a couple of final questions, which we get asked all the time. I know our listeners will be wondering boldly, is it coming to Australia and perhaps when?
Okay, so it's a question I am asked a lot too. A lot of those products are available via private label through our food service distributors here and there. We will start to unify that and under the Boldly umbrella. Also, the Boldly foods have innovated somewhat beyond the private label foods for those foods by removing all the artificial flavors and colors, etc. So that will happen shortly, but the US is still very much the driver for us to because at the end of the day, it is about impact, and Australia is a very small market. But yes, I am here. It makes sense for me and us to make some noise locally. So we'll be out shortly.
Excellent. And also, where's the best place for our listeners to find you and how can they support you? Having heard your story, I'm sure a lot of people will want to get involved.
Look, there's no direct way to support. They're always welcome to reach out and explore synergies and ways that we could potentially combine forces to have an even greater impact. And I'm always open to those conversations. And then probably the best way to reach out in that regard would probably be LinkedIn. And I can reply there. Totally open though. I'm a sponge for information and opportunities to collaborate.
Amazing, amazing. I certainly follow all your content on LinkedIn, and I love it. So keep going. Allen, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I know it's one of your very rare podcast appearances, and I do feel really privileged that you've come on the show today. I'm sure the listeners like ourselves would have got a lot out of listening to your journey and your advice today. So thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks heaps.